It's a really, really exciting day. What an awesome opportunity. We have Nathan, who is the creative genius behind this device, and the creative director of the company Fidgimoto. How are you doing, Nathan?
I'm doing good, thanks. Thanks for having me, Matthew. It's really nice chatting with you finally, and hope you have a happy new year. It's just the beginning of 2026 now, and
Happy New Year to you as well. I hope you had a fantastic start, and for Fidgimoto, I hope it's an incredible year.
yeah, thank you.
The first time that I actually opened up the box and looked at it, I had obviously had the sneak peeks. I did a little bit of digging after you asked if I would like to create a video. I was like, I didn't hesitate. I jumped straight in and then figured out what it was. So the more I looked at it and did my research, the more I realized that this was a lot more special than I think I had realized. Because of the enigmatic nature of what it is, it's one of those pieces where when you're in front of it, when it's in your hand, it clicks. The rest of us were surprised by the appearance out of nowhere of Fidgimoto and the Vortex. It just kind of you entered the game fully formed with a team, with a brand, and with this executive piece. Everything shrouded in mystery.
That's part of the goal, I would say, is the mystery. The mystery a little bit with the brand, although some of that's maybe unintentional. But even there's this element of mystery in the toy as well. It's a kind of seamless, screwless design. It's not very obvious how it's been put together. It's very much not obvious how we've made it so silent, and it's just kind of we shroud it in a little bit of mystery that is just kind of it's something really unique that no one else has kind of ever done, and so I think having a little bit of that mystique and mystery is a little bit of the fun, and some of it's a bit intentional. I think that thing of coming out of nowhere is something that people from the outside always say, but certainly from the inside, it doesn't really feel like it, because this is something that we've been working on for a really, really long time. My background is as a product developer, so I, help design and manage the entire process of developing a product right from conception and ideation all the way through to mass production and manufacturing. And so, creating this was, a long process of figuring that out. And in the sense of coming out of nowhere, like we didn't really have a fan base or anyone that we were really interacting with through the development process of this. So in that sense, it was kind of a coming out of nowhere. I have a lot of friends who are, fidgeters, and a number of people that I know who, like things like this that I kind of used as product testers, throughout our prototyping process. But yeah, in terms of like actually engaging and interacting with the general public, that actually came after our actual like official product launch. And so I think for a lot of people, it looks like we just kind of popped out of nowhere fully formed, but really this is something that we spent a year and a half developing this, and it was kind of a labor of love, like as we talked about before in our emails, like I consider this almost like a piece of art that we really put a lot of care and love into. And I think when you're creating something that's artistic that also needs to be manufacturable, that's almost like another level of just care and attention that needs to be taken in it. So that's kind of a little bit of the behind the scenes of a year and a half of working silently, I guess, partly literally with the fact that it's a silent fidget toy, but just kind of on our own, trying to create something that worked. It always bothers me too to you see these people who are developing this thing, and you're like, I want it, and they're like, no, it's not perfect yet, and you're like, it looks good enough, I just want to try it, right? And I guess maybe sometimes that's good marketing to kind of develop the hype. But we were just kind of laser focused in this. I'm not a marketing person. I'm a product developer. So that's where all the time went. And that's probably why you didn't hear about me originally.
I love the attention to detail. We jumped straight in. This is the Fidgimoto. This is the Vortex by Fidgimoto. And a work of art, a labor of love. I think it's a beautiful piece. I wanted to ask you, it's awesome that I get you face to face. Are you a fan of architectural design? Because one of the first things that I noticed was this looks like a classical pillar from either classical architecture or Renaissance architecture, and even paintings.
Yeah, great question. And yeah, absolutely a big fan of architecture. I would say probably one of my favorite architects would be Frank Gehry. I think he's created some really cool things. But yeah, I have a number of favorites, and I just love whenever I'm traveling to someplace new to just walk around the city and look at very modern and cool buildings, and then also look at older cathedrals and things that took hundreds of years to build, and people poured their entire lives into creating something. Architecture is in a sense also a very difficult kind of career to get into, in terms of like actually getting to the point where you're designing the structure and you're the leader in that. Product development is also incredibly difficult because there's so many different components to it, but certainly I think it's also something that one, if they have an aptitude for design, something that you can get into a little bit more easily, perhaps. Like I think developing this versus developing a pillar that actually then gets installed in some sort of building and someone has the budget for that is a very different kind of levels. Yeah, I guess where did the inspiration for this kind of texture come from? When you mentioned the pillars, it reminded me there's some sort of mosque, and I'll have to look up what the name of it is. I'll send it to you later. And it also has like a spiral kind of shape to it, and it's a very cool one. I don't know. It's a very famous one. That wasn't exactly what I was thinking while making this. I think ripples are in. I've been seeing that a lot in just kind of industrial design trends, and I think that they look really cool. How this actually kind of came to be is we were trying to make something that was more than just a cylinder. Like we had the function. The function came first, and then a rough form came out of the function in terms of the diameter, in terms of the length, in terms of where the center point is, so that you can kind of play with it with one hand, but also be able to play with it with two hands, and for it to be able to kind of sit in the hand and kind of on your pinky there, so you can kind of click it like that. Like we had developed a size, which was basically two dimensions, a diameter and a length. And then it's like, okay, what can we do to make this really cool? One of the things that we looked at was kind of really interesting pattern or texture, using a technique called guilloche. They'll use that a lot in some fancy watches on the background, and it's an engraving method where you engrave very complex patterns, typically into something flat, but you can also do it on something cylindrical. And so we were looking at doing something like almost like a knurling pattern, but something that wasn't like a quick machining operation where you put something in, move it across, and then there's kind of a rough pattern on it. Something that's, often used for like tools to make handles and things like that. We wanted to make something, that had some care behind it. And so I had this, I have a Pinterest board of literally just textures. And so, I was looking through this and I kept coming back to these ripples. And the thing with the ripples is I like how they fade, into whatever they're kind of coming out of. and I really wanted to figure out how to do that in metal, and talk to some manufacturers that weren't that confident that they could actually do that. Like we needed to find a CNC machine shop that could not only, engrave a line or a flute into something, but then also do a bunch of tiny intricate machining movements at the very end of each flute to kind of fade it out into the cylinder. And this is something that if you're talking to an artist or someone who has a piece of clay, and they've kind of roughed out a line, and then at the end, it's a process of like smoothing something in. That's one thing, and is sort of intuitive for a person. But then to get a machinist to program literally hundreds of lines of G code to instruct a CNC robot to go and actually scrape out exactly the right little bits of metal on a material that's not actually soft. You can't kind of like smoosh it into the right shape like you can with clay, is not easy, and it took us a while to find a machine shop who was up for the task, and we're really happy with the work that they're doing for us. We are designers, and we kind of know what we are best at, so we then needed to go and find, okay, who's the best at the machining side of things, and found a really good partner for that, so we're very happy.
Are you happy to speak about your team and their roles? And when I speak to friends about this, I kind of have to go, this is what is behind this. Mm-hmm. Then they have that context and they go, oh, this is a serious design here. And mm-hmm. they get it then. They go, I really would enjoy this. Especially my friends who work in spaces where they're in meetings or boardrooms or have to be quiet.
Like I was saying, I have a background in product development, so I run my own business doing consulting for product development, and and Mahmoud and I have worked together for probably close to 5 years now. I had a pretty complicated, some sort of mechanical need, and ultimately found somebody who was up to the task, and that was Mahmoud. He's very, very experienced in SolidWorks, which is a program that I am not very experienced in. It's kind of funny because people ask me what it is that I do, and if I know it's going to be a short conversation, I say I'm a product designer, and they say, okay, that's cool, and then we move on. If it's going to be a longer conversation, or if I'm talking to somebody who works in a design space, I'm always careful because I'm not, like, I didn't go to school necessarily for design, right? That's a whole other kind of story, but I think, like, I know enough about all of the sort of steps in the product development process and have enough of that creativity that I know what I want to create, and I know how to create it and what needs to be done to kind of take it to fruition. And it's always been about assembling the team of the right people for every stage of that process. So Mahmoud's been an invaluable part of the team from in terms of my consulting business, from the mechanical engineering standpoint for the last 5 years or so. And so he really helped in the process of making this silent. So he and I would meet every single week, try something out, go prototype it, try it, it wouldn't work. Next week we meet again, and he's just been like the most awesome sounding board to go, like, I know what I want, and I can kind of describe it, and he kind of knows how to model that. And I think we've kind of reached a point in our working relationship where I feel like he can read my mind. And when it's like two people with different skill sets sort of thinking with the same mind, it's so cool that we can just be screen sharing something with each other, and something kind of going in one direction, and I want to say, I think you should do that, and then he just goes and does that before I even had a chance to say it. Like, he just has a sense of how I think from a design standpoint after working together for so long, and I understand what he needs from me in terms of to communicate effectively. So anyway, he and I just have a blast working together, and it's been so fun, and we'll have many more years to come, I'm sure, developing more cool products and more cool fidget toys.
Well, in my younger days, being in a band and having that relationship with people where maybe you can't communicate often by speaking. Sometimes it's a look, sometimes
Yes,
it's a feeling or a movement
a
that you
nod,
have.
right?
I think that's where the best creativity happens, where you have this idea and then there's this the synchronization that happens in the frequency of whatever you're thinking about, and
Mm-hmm.
it translates into something where two brains pull something together. It's like true genius.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I
I
think
love
it's one of those things where there's so many different, I guess, when you talk about art, you have mediums, right? Like somebody may be into watercolor, right? Or maybe they have a particular instrument that they play. And I think in product development, there's just so many aspects to it, right? You have the mechanical engineering, you have the industrial design, you have the design for manufacturability, which is another aspect of it. And if you're doing something more complex, you may have hardware engineering and firmware and software and all those things. Like there's just so many different things that kind of come into it. So I think there's one aspect of being an artist, like a solo artist, for example, but then, like you said, it being in a band, there's this kind of cohesiveness where you have these different people who are taking their different skills, putting them together, and then producing something out of that. So yeah, that's kind of a good analogy in the sense, you have your bandmates, you're very tight with all of them, you can kind of communicate with just, a nod and you all come in on cue. And so, yeah, it does feel like that after working with these guys for so long, that it's really easy and it's really fun.
you pursue perfection. That's what I've noticed about you, and sometimes
Yes.
it is about getting the right team behind you. I think I can relate to that. I don't always achieve it because I think my deadlines aren't 300 days long. But it's really incredible. I really I love the fact that this is the level of detail is quite incredible, and you spoke about how it is seamless. So it's also, in its design, remind me of maybe modern tech, Apple. When you pick up an iPhone, how the heck does the thing open and close? I love that about it. I think it's really interesting. Some people might want to open up and see the mechanisms and everything, but I think not knowing in this it also has its place. And I think that you've come in and challenged the thinking of the fidget community, because first of all, you've come in almost unannounced with this product that exists, but you've gone a step beyond that and you've almost created your own, it seems like you've created your own category, which is also really exciting. So I think for reviewers and for people who have been in the game for a long time, it's probably difficult to speak about because you haven't got things to compare it to, or reference as many reference points. Maybe that's why it's exciting to speak about the music and the art rather as your source of inspiration than other fidgets that exist. And even in like profiling your people, some are flary and some are precise and what would you considered, and I love that. I really think that you've pitched it as an executive fidget toy, which is really interesting because you have things that have silent haptics but make a noise, or there's something flashy about them. I could imagine doing a TED talk or a boardroom meeting or a lecture, and this not really getting in the way of that. It kind of looks like something you might have in your hand as a presentation clicker, a laser pointer. You spoke about vapes and makeup. I think it's a little bit better than a vape or a bottle of mascara or lipstick. Or
and it's
lip gloss.
healthier than a vape too, to calm you down, right? It's no side effects.
I needed this. There was a day that I actually really needed this.
When you were talking about, Apple design, and I think Johnny Ive has done some really, really cool and innovative things at Apple, and created some things that just nobody had ever thought of, right? And really sort of blaze a new trail. So in the design of this, I went on eBay and I bought a pile of broken iPods. And I got them, and I actually took them apart to figure out, how that was designed. And the thing is, it is very easy to design something that's seamless. Like you or I could, design something that has no seams in it. To then go and design something that's seamless that you can assemble is yet another challenge. And then to create parts that you can assemble that end up being seamless, but those parts are actually easy enough to manufacture. Like it's layers of challenge, that goes, inside of this, right? You see kind of what's on the outside, but to be able to get all of that, to work. And so yeah, that was actually part of my process, is taking apart some old iPods and going, how do they cram everything in there and then present you with something that has no screws? Like it's a fascinating thing. It's a beautiful thing. I think, I learned some things through that kind of destructive exploration of those products, and that was part of the inspiration to create something that that was really luxury, fancy, kind of unique. I think what's kind of interesting is now actually having a lot more communication with customers and prospective customers. A number of people in the Fidget community who especially played around with some of these ones with magnets that you can kind of switch out the magnets for different feels and things like that. There's this sort of desire for customization, which once ours kind of goes all together, it's kind of done, right? And I think it was an interesting sort of thought process to go to, because I also like tinkering with things, right? I love to be able to kind of figure out how things work and repairing things, and at the end of the day, we had to do so much that was custom. Like I have literally, for assembling these, I have an array of custom built tools to assemble this. To disassemble is yet then another thing.
One attempted.
and so it kind of came to going, like, we've developed something that's so new and so unique here. We're gonna just kind of shroud it in mystery, put it in people's hands, have them go, this is really cool, we don't really know how this works. And I've ultimately been okay with kind of keeping that sealed and under wraps, just knowing that, like, there's kind of so much complexity there that to sell, a toy with like an array of custom tools so that you can kind of customize it that's not necessarily what you get with an Apple product, for example, right? The expectation with the Apple product is you get it and it's perfect and it works. And so that's kind of what we were going for. But yeah, it was really fun to break apart those old iPods.
This texture is for someone who has tactile needs. Not just the pressing, not just the turning, but I think something that's overlooked with some design is how that feels in your hand, on your skin, and even just touching the surface of this. It's really gratifying. When I was a kid, I had this thing where I needed my fingertips to all they needed to all have the same kind of feeling equally across them. And sometimes when I'm not like in a crowd or being contemplative, I'm just letting my fingers run over this and getting them feeling the feeling that they need to feel. The question, coming back, different metals or different textures, different What different do you have maybe in the pipeline or?
Great question. You know, I think another kind of thing that's unique about this is that it does a couple of different things, right? It has this very quiet, this haptic, tick 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 as you're rotating it, and then also has the click 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 as you press down on it. And it's cool to put it in people's hands and have them kind of discover what it does. I think also that is, in a sense, one of the most challenging things, especially sort of selling it online, is, and people don't know what it is by just looking at it, is you just don't know really what it is, what it does. I'm trying to create some more videos to kind of show people, and this is why I'm reaching out to people like you who enjoy creating this kind of content, to be able to really show what it is. And it's hard to communicate that, because this is the kind of thing where you can put it in someone's hands and they can say, "What's this?" You say, "It's a fidget toy." And they're like, "Oh, what does it do?" And then they go, "Oh, wow, that's really cool." And so they'll be playing with it for this for a minute, and I'll say it also clicks up and down. I'm like, "What do you mean?" I'm like, "This." And then they go like that, and oh wow, like it does something else. And it's just kind of neat. Like there's the initial wow factor that I've got to see with people who've never touched it before, playing with it. And then there's like this another level of wow factor when they realize there's like another mechanism in there. And I think the texture adds yet another thing, because I'll play with it just kind of fiddling it around like that, like you were saying. You kind of use it a little bit like a worry stone, kind of you rub your thumb across it, and I like that idea of having something that does maybe more than one thing. So some of the other designs that we have in the queue, just by virtue of their function or shape, like maybe you don't necessarily have like two axes of different kind of interactions there, but hoping to include a little bit more of this. I think this has kind of become a bit of a theme, is this kind of ripple texture thing. So I think we'll try to kind of keep that motif going throughout all the designs, and so that there is something that even though it's quiet, and even though when you're playing with it, it shouldn't be bothering other people, that you could actually completely silently just be holding this and having some sort of neat kind of tactile interaction with just the texture itself. In terms of materials, it's a really interesting discussion that I'm having with customers. I originally chose aluminum because I wanted to have this really subtle pop of color. So you have the silver one. I've been playing around with the red one, and there's something about anodizing aluminum that it can just get a nice pop of bright color, and I just always really liked the look of that, and so I wanted to design it around that. Have the black body that's very neutral, and pop a little bit of fun, because it's sort of a toy at the end of the day, right? It is something that's fun, but targeting some environment that's maybe more professional, where you're wanting something that's quiet, where it's something that's sleek. You can go to the dollar store and you could get those silicone pop-it things, but they're big and they're colorful and they're kind of in your face, and I think probably a lot of people wouldn't want that on their desk in their office, to be frank, right? So that was the original choice of going with aluminum, and I just sort of thought, okay, we'll do the colored rings and all the colored structure in this aluminum, anodized to the different colors, and do the body in aluminum as well, do everything at once and anodize that black. There's so much pushback for using aluminum, and the thing is, I guess in the fidget community, there is this sort of, I don't know, sort of status in terms of like the toy itself or its price that is associated with the material being used. And I see various fidget spinners, metal fidget spinners, that are made out of all sorts of exotic materials that are sold for exorbitant prices. And at the end of the day, I mean, they're cool and they're pieces of art, and they're shaped in a way, and maybe they're smaller, maybe they're larger, maybe they're weighted in a certain way. But at the end of the day, they're a fidget toy that spins around a bearing, and it's typically across the board. People know what bearings are good, and everyone's using the good bearings. And it's. I don't want to diss anybody who's making cool fidget spinners, because I bought an expensive fidget spinner from one of those people too, right? So I can appreciate that. But when we put the work into this, like, what you're paying for is a year and a half of engineering, probably, I would say, 80 plus hours of like CNC programming time to get this to work. Each piece itself spends literally hours on the CNC machine, to get all of those flutes and the grooves and all the small little details, and the engraving of the logo on the bottom, and all of these different things. There are other toys which are like a couple of operations, and you knock them out in 5 minutes at a time. Like, these are hours of machining time each. And to me, this being made out of another material, at the end of the day, to me, it doesn't change the fact that it spins like this and it clicks like that.
Exactly.
But a lot of people actually really want it to be titanium, or want it to be something cool.
Mm.
And yeah, titanium is a little bit more dense, so there might be a little bit more weight to it. People always kind of remark at this being actually surprisingly weighty, for what it is. So we're talking about titanium now. And I think we may make very slight adjustments to the texture just to kind of differentiate it. Like, this is the titanium version. I think in terms of like the ultimate kind of color, we may do kind of like a little bit of a lighter, more kind of metallic rather than the black color for that, and just kind of do a little bit to kind of separate it. We have a few customers who have said, I will come back and I will buy the titanium one once it's available. So some people are even willing to buy a couple of them just because that's something that matters to them. So I think that's just an interesting thing about listening to our customers and listening to the market. That to me, in designing it, material choice wasn't a huge consideration because we were putting so much effort into the engineering and design. And then afterwards, people are going like, "Oh, we're paying, it's just aluminum." It's like, well, yeah, I guess it is just aluminum, but I could say it's just one thing or another. So anyway, so new materials. Might be looking at titanium. More difficult and challenging to machine. So our CNC shop is sweating a little bit and gonna let us know of some of the limitations that we may have to design around a little bit. But yeah, it's been an interesting conversation, and it seems like that's something that really matters to people.
Yeah.
And so yeah, we're gonna play around with it and see how they turn out. Actually, another kind of aspect to that too is, I think a lot of the makers of these premium fidget toys are often machine shop owners that have a passion for this, that have the knowledge to be able to both design and fabricate, a really cool fidget toy. And that also allows them to be able to spend time, in their off hours tinkering with their CNC machines, trying out different, methods and things like that, and potentially being able to do just one-offs in a particular kind of material or something like that. Again, we're really clear on what our strong point is, and that's on the design and the engineering side. And so by virtue of us outsourcing the actual fabrication of this to a machine shop, that comes with certain limitations of, if they're going to do a machine setup for our tool, or for our product, we might as well be making a good number of them in one batch, right? Otherwise it's just going to be prohibitively expensive, because we don't have the luxury of, just kind of playing around with the machines on the weekends, like some of these makers may be able to do. A lot harder for us to do more of a one-off toy, and so I think that kind of comes with different limitations. If we're going to do titanium ones, we better be sure we have a market for it, and we got to kind of forecast how many we're willing to, purchase to make it worth it. Because, doing things, we still assemble everything ourselves, and I inspect every single piece of every single unit, and make sure that it's perfect before it goes out. But I think that's also a challenge, and maybe what's a little bit different with some of those other makers is they can do the fancy kind of zirconium one-off sort of thing. For us, it's a little bit harder unless we're ordering several of them at a time.
And then the other thing is it's ease of use. So it's not a skill-based thing. You don't have to learn any techniques. Maybe someone might come up with their own way of fidgeting with it. But I mean, I think it's like while you are busy working, pen in hand or whatever it might be, you're able to still, not mindlessly, but like unconsciously have that outlet where you might bite your nails or have a leg jumping up and down that irritates somebody. This is a completely, I think there's this automatic, effortless play around it. Are you a fidgeter by nature, and do you find relief? Is that why you went down this road? What was it that kind of like sparked this idea and then led to the creation of it? Because this doesn't just appear out of nowhere. You have to be a kind of person, I suppose.
I've always been a natural fidgeter, and while I'm working throughout the day, there's something that's on my desk works its way into my hand, and I'm fiddling with it, I'm fidgeting with it, and you hit upon something good that you end up fidgeting with for a long time. And I've been playing with, like, I have this little brass fitting here from a 3D printer, and I've been clicking that, and I actually clicked it so much that it broke today, so I can't do that anymore. And I have a little piece of plastic filament that just I can roll around and around and around constantly, and I'll just be playing with as I'm either in a call like this or while I'm typing something out. And so I've always been a very natural fidgeter, and I think it's pairing that. Okay, I have the fidgety, I've been infected with the fidgety virus or whatever, right? And there's the then there's the product developer in me, and I'm going, like, if we could put this in this, that would be really cool. And I think for me, the thing that gives me the most satisfaction is not creating something for me, but creating something that other people really love too. And so I think that's where this kind of came into fruition, where it's like, okay, I have a vision for something that I could cobble together with things around the house and then fidget with, and it'd be fun. But if we can make this into something that's really cool, that people who are into this kind of thing, who are into fidgeting, who appreciate the artistic side of things, who are looking for like a great gift for somebody, it's like, what are we gonna get, dad, for Father's Day or birthday, or what are we gonna get so and so who's graduating from whatever, like, and there are those people who have everything and you're not sure what to get for them, and then there's the people who it's just, they're hard to shop for too, because it's like what's something unique that they've never seen before. And it was just a really fun thing to just go and create something that's brand new, like it's really inventive, like in the process of destroying these iPods and all these other different items that we broke to figure out how things were working. We looked a lot into sound deadening techniques, and implemented some of them and had to invent others. And it was just really cool in this process to go and actually like go, there's there's nothing in the world that quite does this exactly this way, in this kind of package. How are we going to do that? And it's a kind of cool challenge. So yes, I'm a natural fidgety person plus a product developer. Those two things kind of put together with the desire to kind of put something out there into the world that's really unique and fun for people, I think is kind of what drove this. You know, one thing that I noticed in your unboxing video, and just the little bit of back and forth that we had over email when I originally reached out, is you picked up on and noticed some of the finer details in this that we fussed over for months that most people don't see. And you know, it's funny, my dad and I always have this joke that you don't notice a good website, you only notice a bad website. And I think that's one of the things with design, and that's sort of like, you know, Zach was calling this mindless, like you don't have to think about it. When something is not well thought out, you notice it because there's friction, right? And so in the design of this, we spent so much effort in really paying attention to all these fine details. And once you do pay attention in fine details and you perfect something, then the actual kind of desired result is that people don't notice it.
Yeah.
Because it just works, right? Because it's just seamless, because it just, you know, you don't have to think about it.
And that's the power of collaboration. That's where we started the whole interview, and I think that's what's so beautiful about creative people is when they come together, you have this what would you call it? Like a group genius. So it's not just an individual like intelligence. It kind of becomes something more, because there's passion and there's knowledge and there's expertise shared amongst different people. So thank you for allowing me to collaborate in communicating, I suppose, what this is and how I feel about it, and trying to translate that to your people that you're trying to get it to.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun, and it's, you know, to do anything, I'm sure as you've learned through film too, like to do anything on a certain kind of scale, it requires a team of people who are together, who are sharing a vision. And so it's fun to collaborate on that. This really, in terms of the development of this particular toy, it started with, how do we make this EDC, everyday carry? How do we make this something that you can put in your pocket and take with you and pop it out when you need to, whether it's in the meeting or on the bus, or, you know, somebody was telling me they brought this to the symphony with them, and they're like, it's the only fidget toy that's quiet enough that I can, you know, get that extra little bit of stimulation so that my knee isn't bouncing up and down while I'm listening to this concert that I want to go to, but I know, I have a tendency to do that. And so it was a question of how do we bring this, and it did start with the idea of, you know, an audio knob. And so, you know, you can buy actual audio switches. They're electronic components, and a lot of them are pretty standard components that are in everything from, you know, your hi-fi audio equipment, receivers, in synthesizers, in DJ equipments, you know, on your electric guitars and basses, you know, like these are fairly standard components, and there's a lot of choice in terms of, you know, this one has 20, you know, indices in one rotation. You know, there's others that are smooth, and then have like a little tick right in the middle, so if you need to balance something, you know, you can kind of reset it to the middle. I really like those are cool. And you know, then there's others that are completely smooth. But one of the things is most of these things are, in the electronics world, what we call a panel mount. So you have some sort of a panel, and they stick through the panel. Sometimes there's, you know, a screw on the outside that you might see. Oftentimes, let's say on an electric guitar, you'll have a nut that goes over, and then you have, a knob that goes on top of the component that then hides that. But if you pop open the knob, you can actually maybe see a retaining nut that's on that. And with something like that, there's no space constraint on the back side of the panel. So nobody puts in any engineering in making these small, because it's not a constraint when you're making, a large, rack audio piece of equipment that has maybe only half a dozen knobs on it. You don't have a space constraint on the backside really in any axis. And we needed to make this something that was pocketable. And so all of these things, like this doesn't necessarily look that large. Even so, like still the diagonal dimension of this is greater than the diameter of this toy. But then if you need to build something around that, whether in metal or plastic or any material, it needs to be bigger than that. It needs to have a wall thickness that's thick enough, that's strong enough, and then you need to build, retaining mechanisms to, hold something in and hold it in place. And all of a sudden you have, a thick thing that's not pocketable. Yeah. So we found out very quickly that to create a pocketable everyday carry fidget toy, which somebody can, take with them and literally put in their pocket, was not going to be possible with an off-the-shelf part, which in a sense was unfortunate, because there are so many things that we can choose from and just get really cool off-the-shelf parts that are fun to fidget with and feel really cool, that somebody else has put the year of design and engineering into perfecting. But we ultimately needed to replicate that feeling in a completely new way and just re-engineer it from the ground up. So we started with it should feel like this, yeah. And you can't use this or the principles that are used in it, so we have to throw that away and start with a completely blank slate and go make that exact same feeling. And if you compare these two side by side, because this is the reference point, like they feel basically the same, but knowing what's in this, we had to design it all from scratch, and it was a lot of prototyping iterations, and it was not easy. But ultimately, I feel like it is something that you can take with you.
I didn't realize that is actually the direction that you were wanting to go. So the fact that you've translated that as a musician, as someone who's played with these dials and these knobs and stuff, to pick this up and go, that's what you were thinking. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's where we've spoken about how do you translate through feeling, because it's not through sound and it's not through any other form of description. It's through picking it up and feeling it in your hand. You've managed to translate that. So you've bypassed like language and sound barriers and all these other things, and you've managed to use the frequency of collective thinking and create. I mean, it's amazing. Have any other people who have reviewed this picked up on those mechanisms, the from hi-fi stereos to instruments? And then a little side question: are you a musician, or do you have just a love for that kind of equipment?
Yeah, I think other reviewers, what they notice so quickly about it is that it is nearly silent. It's so funny when I say, it's a nearly silent fidget toy, people get it and they go, wow, that's not nearly silent, like that's completely silent. Well, nothing with some sort of tactile thing is going to be completely silent, but it's as close as we could get it with still kind of having a good feel to it. And so it's funny that, as soon as we say, it's nearly silent, people are like, no, that's better than nearly silent. But then if I say it's a silent fidget toy and someone picks it out, they're like, that's not completely silent, right? So we err on the side of, setting our expectations for, it's pretty quiet. And then if we can exceed those for people, that's great. But I think that's the first thing that people notice is just how quiet it is while still having, a really, considerable tactile feel to it. definitely, I think picking up on the audio knobs is something that people have picked up on, but it's not, I think, immediately obvious. So I think that's something that I want to kind of communicate more to people. Also, in terms of what they're expecting, a lot of people are playing with these loud fidget toys that actually require like a lot of, a lot of just force to turn, and this is something that's a very light thing to turn. So I think, saying it's like an audio knob, it kind of helps people understand what to expect. In terms of kind of the musician side of things, I dabble in some instruments. I feel like I'm not really good at playing any of them, but they're fun. I play a bit of piano, play a bit of ukulele. I've borrowed a few friends' guitars at various times, and played around with those, both electric and acoustic. There's all sorts of random, like, they have a thing with another audio knob on my desk right now, right? And so these things come in and out of my life, and whenever I feel something that has a neat feel to it, it goes in the Fidget project box, which is now getting quite big, with kind of all the things that we're wanting to develop. So I don't know if the musicianship and the love of music or creating music was necessarily the thing that created this. I think actually probably more the love of electronics was why I ended up with this particular rotary encoder switch that was on my desk for God knows what project it was years ago, that this was sitting on my desk and I was fidgeting with it. And it has all these contacts which are kind of pokey, and sometimes I kind of stab myself with it. I'm like, this isn't very, that part doesn't feel good, but there's something in this that is just really compelling. And if that were to be made into fidget toy, and there wasn't any fidget toy like that, so it was a matter of creating something really unique based on that. But yeah, certainly, I was at a local music store with a couple friends the other day, and I went straight to the synthesizers and the DJ equipment to go and try all of the different knobs. And even one of them I didn't like, because the knobs were a little bit too hard to turn, and I'm going, I don't know, something about the feel wasn't right. And then there was another one that had the thing where it kind of had that center lock for some sort of a balance knob. I'm like, oh, I could create a fidget toy just like that. And it's like, well, I don't want to buy a piece of $1,000 audio equipment to pull it apart just for the one switch. But I'm going, I really wonder, is this an off-the-shelf component that they did, or did they design this themselves? Because this feels really good. So yeah, hopefully that kind of answers your question a bit.
Definitely, I think it's been like really eye-opening, and like I feel really inspired, even just having spoken to you about this, and your thinking and your team and your, I think your ambition and everything, which is incredible. It's a beautiful piece.
Thank you.
Yeah, I really, really, I was humbled when I realized what you were sending me, who Fidgimoto was, that I was asked to review it and to be the first one in South Africa to have.
And your content is great. It's fantastic. When I came across your channel, I'm like, I'm asking, like, who is this guy who's come out of nowhere, who's just randomly producing this incredible, like, cinematic fidget toy content. And like, it could be anything, in the sense that I could take my product development ingenuity, and it does with my different clients. Like, they're all sorts of like completely different industries, right? But I could have had a passion for like something completely different. I could have designed a new pair of kitchen tongs, and I could be talking to somebody who reviews kitchen gadgets right on YouTube and creates cinematic kitchen gadget thing, right? And you could be doing that too, right? But it just so happens that there's this intersection of a product developer who loves fidgeting, and a videographer, director, who has a lot of skills in that, who loves luxury fidget toys, and then all of a sudden there's that kind of intersection there. So so yeah, I guess it's the same experience for me too, that I feel honored to be able to talk to you, somebody who has so much skill to be able to communicate in an audio visual sense, which is something that I have very minimal experience in, but enough experience to know just how hard it is to actually do it well. Again, with that thing of like, you notice bad design a lot more easily than you notice good design, because the good design is seamless. I think it was the same with your videos and your content. Is it just, yeah, it just looks very, very professional, and there's no criticism that I have of anything of it, because it just looks so well produced and so professional. So yeah, same experience for me. It's like, where did Matthew come from? This guy who just creates cinematic fancy fidget toy content. Like, what a perfect match of somebody to send a fidget toy to. So thanks for doing what you're doing as well.
Perfect match. I think yeah, it's incredible. I think just to maybe answer, maybe it wasn't a question, but why fidget toys and why filming fidgets is, I think that there's that Japanese word, I think it's ikigai, finding like purpose. Why am I alive? I'm a creative. What do I want to create content around? It's something that gives back. So that's the other like circle of purpose and giving back to the world. Why am I here? So it's a little bit of like at some I think in the beginning stages it was a bit of like a thankless task, but now I think that people are seeing it. People like you are appreciating it. I'm going, wow, this is the thing. I'm enjoying it. It's not just a hobby. I'm enjoying meeting people like you and experiencing and exploring other people's creativity. So the whole thing has been about collaboration and how does it actually help? How does it help cognition, concentration? How does it make me a better person? Because this can make you a better person if you are like deregulated. And with this in hand, it can be better than a pill that you have to pop, or having to decompress by pressing a button, or giving it a twist. When you really, I noticed something interesting. No one's really picked this up, but I don't know if it's meant to do that. I might break something. I was having a really, really overstimulating day in an environment that I wasn't comfortable being in. And when I started doing that, the whole thing comes alive, it vibrates, and it's more than just what's happening inside. I think that even the design on the outside, the seeing the way that it feels is shooting out this vibration into your hands, into your system, that is very regulating. So it's a point that I think I maybe didn't jot down, but I was thinking about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's cool, just the physics of having a lot of mass, right? There's a lot of metal there, and then having this little kind of vibration and how it goes through it, especially when you start spinning it really quickly. And I think it's been really fun because there's so many different ways. Like, you see me kind of fiddling with it like this, and then there's even just spinning it around your fingers, right, with not even using the mechanism at all. And I think there's just so many ways of using it. It's fun. You're talking about sort of like giving back and creating something that gives something to the world. Like, it's been an interesting kind of process to think about, putting so much work and time and money and thought and development effort and engineering into something that at the end of the day is a toy, and a very expensive toy. Like, you can go to the dollar store and you can get something that basically does what in terms of the you need something to keep your hands busy, and you can go and get something for 1/100th of the price. Like, you can do that. And so I'm going, okay, am I adding something to the world by putting all of this effort into, creating this thing. Part of it is the art aspect, of creating something that's really unique. Part of also why Mahmoud, Joaquin, and I embarked on this was basically as an internal design challenge. Like, we knew it would be very difficult to create a mechanism in a diameter small enough to be pocketable and make it nearly silent and make it beautiful and make it comfortable to hold. Like, it in something that's so simple, which is just like a small 16 millimeter diameter cylinder made out of aluminum. Like, there's so many things to think of, that we knew if we were able to pull this off, we would learn so many things that I think would ultimately be useful in future products and future challenges. And I think it also helped us in our communication with each other too, just having like a shared challenge and trying to work through that together, and solve the problems that literally took months and literally took hundreds of prototypes to get right, and took visits to different manufacturers and suppliers of different parts, and trying different things, and consulting with people who are experts in different industries. And it's so funny, I went into a spring manufacturer and I said, I need something like this because this is what I'm trying to do. And it's like, it was going to be a custom part, and it was going to be very expensive to create tooling for all of this, and then we're going to need to buy 50,000 at a time, sort of thing. And walked in there and had probably like a 2-minute conversation with a guy whose entire life is springs. And he literally took a sticky note and he like went like this and like drew a little thing, and he said, you need to do that, and you can get that off the shelf, and you never need to work with us because they cost about like 1/10 of a cent per piece or something. That's what you need to do. And it was a 2-minute conversation, and he scribbled something on a post-it note, and he said, you're on your way. And it's like, it's just this little piece of genius that I got from this one guy, and there's all these little pieces of genius that come into this, that created something that, again, you appreciate, and I think it solves different needs. It solves a need for the silent thing, like you said. That's kind of becoming a new thing in the market. Like, I have friends who are teachers, and these are banned in the schools because they bother other people, and teachers will allow some of them in their classrooms. And then it also, I think, makes a great gift for people who, want to get something that's meaningful for somebody in their life, that says like, I get you, and here's something unique that you've probably never seen before. And to be able to create something that can fill that need of just kind of a way of saying like, I appreciate you, and here's something unique I got you, is another cool thing. So yeah, a lot of skill development came out of it, a lot of experience, a lot of connections with different people that are continuing, with connections with people like yourself. Yeah, really fun, learning lots. We'll be definitely applying these things to future toys we're developing, and probably random other projects that come up, which, yeah, it already has. The learnings have already paid off in lots of different projects.
It's been such a privilege to be able to speak to the creator of something like this, because often there's that wall of who is the person who designed this and what is it about. So having this direct link to your thinking has been really, really special, and I'm very grateful for it. Thank you.
Well, thank you for your time as well, and for I don't know even who suggested that we do this. I think we were just saying like, hey, we could chat too if you had any questions, and then it came into talking about like, yeah, let's kind of do it in this format where we can then share some aspects of this with other people who are curious about what went into this, who's behind Fidgimoto, and yeah, so thank you very much for doing that, and for your time too. early morning
Thank
for you, late night for me, and yeah, the time zones are always kind of a challenge sometimes. But I mean, that's the kind of the world that I live in. You have different people with different skills and all over the world, and so you make the time for it.
Yeah, thank you for making the time. Like, again, like really, it's an honor, and it's been a privilege to speak to you, and it's now made my brain really work. I'm thinking about all these other ideas, so I mean, I would love the conversation to continue, but I mean, it can always be an email or down the line if we want to chat further. It would be awesome to do that. But yeah, I mean, this is an absolute gem. It's a work of art. I see it. I see it and I love it, and I hope that people...
You get it.
I get it, yeah. I picked it up and I was like, you've translated your thinking into producing, which is incredible. I think that's one of the hardest things you can do, and to have this in the world is exceptional. And I do hope that more people realize what it is and have the ability to be able to get one of these in hand. So if you don't have someone to give this to, get it for yourself, because treat yourself. It's beautiful. I think it's an important, for those who need it, it can be quite an important tool. You can wear a suit and have this in hand and not be, it's not childlike, which is incredible. And it's a work of art. It's functional. People might ask, what does it do? And that's what it does. It gives back to you. So you've given us a gift. You've given the world a gift, you and your team. So thank you. And I'm really looking forward to seeing what Fidgimoto has for 2026. What is lined up.